In this video, I'm going to teach you guys exactly how to find the best games to bet on. Now let's just get right into it. First thing, every day that you look at a slate of games, what do you see? You see money line plays, depending on the sport, you see spread plays, you see totals, you see player props, you see all that stuff. And there's just so much stuff out there that it could be overwhelming for anybody when they just look at it, all right? So how do you narrow it down to just a certain amount of games that you can actually do more research and actually make a play that's gonna give you the highest probability of winning? Well, that's what I'm gonna share with you. So let's jump into the first step. First step is line movement. All right. A lot of people want to argue and say that, it's a basic thing, but this is a base, all right, of what you need to look at when you're looking at money lines and totals and spreads. So soon as you look at a slate of games and you see, you're going to do this in 3 sections. All right. So first it's going to be the money line, and then you'll do the totals and you'll do the spreads depending on what sport that you're looking at. All right. But money lines, when you look and you see that a line opened up at, let's say, minus 150, and then now you see it currently at minus 200, minus 210. Well, that is a game that you need to look into. Those games you need to circle. Now, games that, let's say, opened up at minus 150 and they're still at minus 150 or minus 155, you don't need to bother with those games, all right? There hasn't been no line movement on there. There's nothing that it could tell you. So those games you ignore. The ones with drastic line movement right out the gate, you circle. All right, because those will be games that you look into. Now, totals, for example. We're going to use baseball for an example. Let's say that the total in a baseball game was 8.5 is what it opened up at. Now, if you look and it says it's currently moved up to 9.5, those are games that you would circle. All right, and then games that are 8.5 that opened up and now are just sitting still at 8.5, you would ignore those games, because those games right there, there's nothing to tell from the line. If the line doesn't move, there's nothing you can do. All right, it's not telling you anything if the line doesn't move. Now with spreads, it's the same exact thing. Now, obviously spreads, you don't really want to use spreads when it comes to baseball and when it comes to hockey, because it's just minus 1.5 or plus 1.5 either way. All right, you're not going to see line movement there. But when it comes to basketball, the NFL, all that stuff, you're going to see movement there. All right. You'll see, like, if a team opens up at minus 3 and now they're minus 6, or if a team opens up at minus 3 and now they're plus 2 or something, and it switches like that. Those are games that you're going to want to circle. All right. So once you go through your first slate, looking at, the slate of games for that day, and you circle those key games, that is where you're going to be able to narrow down from, let's say, 20, 30 games down to about 5 to 6 to 7 games that you could look further into. Now, once you have circled those games and you have those games written down, your next step that you want to do is you want to look at how the teams that are going against each other, how they have did in previous matchups. All right. This doesn't always come into account. Sometimes a team hasn't played another team in 10 plus years. You obviously can't really take into account because it's a different team, different players and all that stuff. But teams that are inside the same conference, that play each other multiple times, and especially in pro sports where the teams don't change that drastically, you can look into recent performances and see exactly how they match up head to head, because you could use that information. But like I said, if there's been drastic changes to a team to where the last time they played, it was a whole different looking team, then you can't really take those into account. But when the team's base has stayed together and you can see that, they've been together for a couple years, then you can use, recent head-to-head data for that. Now in college, you can't really use it as much. All right, because every year those teams pretty much change. You got players coming out, going to the pros and stuff like that. So college, you can't really rely on that stuff. But for the pros, you can. Like I said, as long as there's not drastic changes to teams, then you can rely on that stuff. And now the final thing you want to look at for money lines, totals, and spreads is going to be where the money is going. All right. You want to look at the sportsbook data to find out who's betting what, how much money is being placed on certain areas, because that's very important. All right. When you're able to see that data, that is where you can actually see if everything lines up and if everything is going the way that you're going and where the money and the bet percentage is. Very important to see that stuff. All right. You have to be able to see that data to be able to make a solid decision on which games you're going to bet and the higher probability games. All right. It really comes down to that. So you got to pay attention exactly and see that data from the sports book, so that way you can make your decision, because once you make your decision, it should line up with everything else that you were looking at. All right. And once it does, that is going to be the play that gives you the highest probability. All right. Because now I just taught you guys about how to look for money lines, totals, and spreads. Now let's take a look at player props. Now in player props, on any given day, there's a million player props out there. All right. Depending on the sport, you're going to find plenty of stuff. Now, how do you decipher which ones to bet on though? What you need to look at when it comes to player props is you need to look at certain statistics, all right? Major stats. All right, here's an example that I like to tell you guys. Baseball, for example. You want to look at if it's a hitter, hits, obviously. All right, that's a major stat for them. If you're a pitcher, runs that they give up or strikeouts. That's stuff that you want to look at, when it comes to player props. Just for example, in baseball. Basketball, you want to look at points, rebounds, assists. All right, because that's very important. Football, you want to look at what their position is, obviously. If it's quarterback, you're looking at their passing yards. All right, that's a major stat within there. If they're running back, you're looking for the rushing yards. All right, it sounds basic, but those are where you want to hover. You don't really want to hover with crazy props. For a running back, you look at, the receiving yards. All right, you don't really want to pay attention to that as much. You want to pay attention to the dominant stat to their position. All right, now once you have did that, here's something that you need to do. All right, and if you don't already have it, like I said, I have it for you guys down in the description inside our app. They're PDFs that show you the probability of what the odds are the sportsbook gives you for player props, and then how you can kind of base what the percentage is for that. All right, all you gotta do is click the link down below, download the app for that, and the PDFs are in there for you. All right, so next step here is what you're gonna do is once you find that major stat, for example, baseball hits, you're gonna go and you're gonna look at that player's stats. Once you look at that player's stats, you're gonna go day by day and write down how many times they've hit that stat. You could do the over or the under, it doesn't matter. You could do either or, you could do both. Go through and write down how many times they've hit that stat or how many times they haven't hit that stat. All right, once you do that, like I said, for example, hits, you'd go through and you'd label how many times did they get a hit in every game this season? How many times did they not get a hit in every game this season? You write those down. Whatever has the higher probability and the higher percentage, that's the prop bet that you're probably going to end up making, depending on the odds, obviously, because the odds need to line up with your probability as well. For example, let's say Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge, if you look at his over 0.5 hits, means he has to get one hit. It's minus 200. Well, right out the gate, that's a 66% shot. All right, that's a 66% probability that that's going to hit. Now, if you go through and you look at how many times he's got a hit in each game throughout the season, and it shows that in 73% of the games he was able to get a hit. Well, guess what? Now you have a minus 200 with a 73% probability, and you have about a 7% edge there. All right, so you need to understand that that is where in player props, where you're able to find value is in the discrepancies between what the odds are the sportsbook gives you and what the real probability of the odds are. All right, of that actually happening. Like I said, if you guys want that PDF, you go down in the description, you click the link and you download our app. They're inside there. All right, it's very simple. That is exactly how you're able to find player props, because the goal of finding player props and playing player props is finding the plays that have the highest probability of winning. Once you find the plays that have the highest probability of winning, those are the only plays that you should be playing in player props. All right, now there's not always going to be discrepancies though. Not every single player prop there's going to be a discrepancy. Sometimes the sports books are right on the money. Sometimes, let's say there's a minus 200, has a 66% probability, and when you look at the stats, it also has a 66% probability. Or sometimes it even has a worse, where the real life probability is 55%, but the sportsbook has the odds at minus 200. Those are plays you definitely want to avoid. All right, so those are plays where you can cross out when you're going through. All right, you only want to play player props that are going to give you an edge and are going to give you an actual higher probability and a higher value. So that way, long term, you're going to be winning more than you're going to be losing. As always, guys, I'm Frank with Linemaker Sports. I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, I'm out.